And welcome everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I want to say thank you for taking out time in your busy schedule to join us this evening. And we have with us our guest speaker, Andrew, and help me, I think it's Gasnola. Oh, Gasnola. Okay, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And our other speaker couldn't make it, and she sends apology. Hopefully, she said next edition she'll be joining us. She had an urgent meeting to attend to. So we'll be speaking on inclusion for the past 2 episodes. So on inclusion in terms of respect to women, in terms to government, in terms to health. We call them health experts. We also looked at advocates, that disability people. So now looked at inclusion with respect to taxes and car hailing services. So with us today, we have our head of public policy, all the way from Southern Africa, right? Yeah, so I want to say thank you for joining us today. Andrew Gasnola, he works in both as a head of public policy for Southern Africa, and he has over 16 years experience working in the professional services, non-profit, civil society, management consulting, public sector, etc. Is an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa with a law degree from the University of Western Cape and has a master degree from the University of Cape Town. He has received several recognition from organizations for his leadership, including the Obama Foundation as an Obama Africa leader, a goalkeeper by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So he has a lot of achievement. A couple of time we'll stop there. So Andrew, once more, I want to say thank you for taking out time in your busy schedule to join us. And so it's part of our tradition to always know where our guests are joining us from. So we can't do that now at the moment. We'll do that maybe towards the middle of the show. So just for us to kickstart. Okay, let me start with like a light question. Can you just tell us what you think or why you think boats came into existence? Yeah. Because I believe every transport services came to satisfy a need. So why was boats? Because other people know about boats and other hailing services, but they don't know the essence why they came into existence. So can you please start telling us why boats? Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much, and good afternoon and good evening to everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I think just as very brief sort of feedback around what is BALT. So essentially, BALT was established in Estonia by, at that time, a young person, 19 years old at the time. And it was really in response to the needs in his ecosystem, right? Like many of us across the global south and in Africa, often we find an idea and we start something because of a need in our community. And so he found that there was an important need around people being able to access transport in his community. And then he expanded that dream. To such an extent that BALT operates in 300 cities across 45 countries. So from West Africa to East Africa to all the way in Southern Africa, up all the way to the Nordics and also into the Middle East. And essentially what we offer is a platform for integration into broader ecosystems, right? So in whatever city or town you find yourself in, we believe people should be able to access affordable and reliable transport. And we believe we have a role to play in doing that. But at the same time, it's not just about e-hailing services, right? It's also about, in an African context, it's about borders, scooting around in East Africa, which are also on our platform. It's about meter taxis also being on a platform like this and being accessible to other people. But at the same time, for you to be able to use a e-bike, an electric bike or an electric scooter, and then being able to use a bus, or being able to use a paratransit operator or e-hailing operator. And so that's essentially what we are. And obviously, I think in many cases, what we've done is we've rooted ourselves in the countries we are in. And obviously, we then build capacity around that and we provide the best offer to that community as possible.
Well, detailed explanation. You said something that caught my attention. So you said both is in over 45 countries. Yeah, and I believe we have both in this global south and the global west.
We do.
Global North, yeah. So I guess just out of curiosity, I know you are responding for Southern Africa. Do both work the same way the way it works in Southern Africa? Is it how it works in Western, or is it how it works in Europe, if you get what I mean?
No, I completely understand what you mean. So I think, look, from an app perspective, right? So the app that you're going to have on your phone is going to be the same as whether you're using it in Nairobi or using it in London, or whether you're using it in Accra. But I think what we are doing, obviously from a scale perspective, is to make sure that, that the app is available in other languages as well. So it's also available in, one of the plans is to make sure it's available in Swahili, Igbo, and so on. And essentially that the offering will vary, right? So you're going to find a a motorbike scooter in East Africa that you're going to be able to use in Uganda, but you're not necessarily going to find that in London because the dynamics are very different. But I think essentially what we look at, whether it's Ghana or Nigeria or Southern Africa, we look to see what role players in that country can benefit from using Bolt, because essentially what we provide is a larger pool of customers, right? So as opposed to you standing on the main road looking for boda, you can actually just go on your phone and you can make sure that you get the boda you want at the destination you want. So I think there is that level of tailoring and offering, right? And I think it's interesting, particularly with the electric move across the continent, across Africa, there's going to be some interesting dynamics around how we can use electric vehicles in the e-hailing space, how we can use it for deliveries to our homes or to our places of work.
Okay, thank you. Something actually caught my attention, as in, then it says about the application, how it's customized to users' need, and about making it in different languages. So I haven't seen, but I'm just imagining seeing them both in maybe Igbo language or the common language. It's gonna be very interesting. I'm looking forward to that. I think it's a new concept, or I don't really follow into it.
Yeah, no, so it is. It's actually, I was on a call earlier today and we were talking about the very same thing, right? That from an inclusionary perspective, both from a language perspective, but also a cultural perspective, you need to make certain things available across the world. And it can't just be in one language. Exactly. And so from an inclusionary perspective, I think that's important. But then over and above sort of language, there's other things but I think we'll get into it around the use of Bluetooth and, if someone, how they're able to access information, possibly say through a hearing aid as opposed to visually. So I think, but we'll get into that during the conversation. But I think at our heart as a business, we're always looking at how do we make the product better for users and how do we make it appropriate for the markets we're in, right?
Yeah. Okay, just on a lighter note, I think maybe both can consider making it in Pidgin English, or do they call Pidgin, or what's it called? Is it broken or local? I don't know what it's called, but I know a lot of people actually speak that kind of English or informal. I think that will actually help a lot of people, especially people that are not are not literate. I think that will actually be more inclusive and help them with that. So thank you so much. So my next question is this. Like I said, both are in different countries. Yeah, so I don't know if you can answer this for me in general, or this is just for Southern Africa. So we've heard of stories of people saying they call services and the driver cancels for one reason or another. So I believe there are policies guiding this behavior or this situation. So could you please help us with that? What are the policies guiding when a trip is ordered but the driver cancels, especially for no good reason? So what's the
Sure. So I think, it's obviously a variable issue, right? Sometimes it's the driver deciding that they actually can't take the trip anymore, or maybe they have fuel issues, or maybe they in quite hectic traffic. But from a business perspective, this is obviously, as we were talking about what passengers receive, a large part of what we've been doing from a product team perspective and internally, and this is both in the African context but also elsewhere, is essentially looking at driver behavior and how one can manage and incentivize better behavior, right? So really looking at the scoring structure, so where drivers are cancelling for no real reason, so that the scoring of those drivers will then be adversely affected, but then also to begin to encourage them in more meaningful ways to make the change, right? So that it's not ad hoc, So, they don't just get punishment by a bad score, but that incrementally over time, that overall the quality of the experience that you as a user will receive and the driver's behavior will change. And then also the other thing we're doing is obviously education. So rolling out specific information to drivers on a weekly basis around the type of things they need to be doing and how they need to obviously be operating on the platform. That's an ongoing process, obviously, as you can imagine, because these issues continue to, be a role in our sector, but it is something we're working on with drivers to make sure that gets improved and addressed. And then I think the other element is the type of incentive programs one can encourage drivers. And so we've run a number, whether it's in Nigeria or down here in South Africa or in East Africa, and recently in Ghana, where drivers behave in a more reasonable and obviously a more customer-facing approach, that they get incentivized. And so we actually had a number of competitions where drivers were able to win scooters or vehicles, depending on the market and what made sense. And that has seen a marked improvement. But it is something that we continue to work on and to try and address.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So I'm going to try this slide one more time. So please, my audience, you're going to help me and go to this site. So can you see my screen now? Let's go to the site www.menti.com and enter the code 57889730 and answer the question. Have you ever ordered a taxi cab and it's got cancelled? So I want to know if it's just maybe just a few people or a small. So somebody said yes already. And yeah, so we just leave it for 60 seconds. So I hope you guys can help and just go to www.menti.com and enter 57889730. Okay. Okay, no. All right, that is good. So that's balanced. No, yes. Just please, just more response. Let's see how that works. Okay, yes. Okay. All right. So 40 seconds and we'll close the poll. Okay, yes. Okay. All right. So just to help us understand this information, could you just please put on the chat if you're from like West Africa, South Africa, or just outside Africa? Just help us with that, please. Just let us know where our audience are joining us from. Okay, and he said no. Okay, so thank you for that. From Nigeria, yes. Okay. Just one more response, then move to the next. From UK, and yes or no? We don't. Oh yes. Okay. So it's great. We have from Africa, we have from Ireland, we have from UK. That's amazing. So thank you so much for our audience. Okay, and let's go to the next question before we come at the last pool. So back to Andrew, because now this is not peculiar to boats alone, because I asked some of my friends in United Arab and also in I think Latin America to just help me interview drivers, taxi or boat, for example, and they talked about a lot of reasons why they cancel trips. So this is not just peculiar to boats alone. So now there have been some complaints from passengers regarding taxi drivers refusing to go to certain locations due to time of the day or destination. Because I know this happens to, like me now, when I was in Nigeria, because I'm currently in the UK doing my studies, there's a particular location you get to that in the day you can easily get a vehicle there. But when it gets to the night, you see that they're not going or they escalate the price. So what's your take on that regarding taxis or boat, if you want to use that as an example? Do you guys consider that a plan?
Sure. Yeah. So I think you need obviously a varied sort of approach around it, right? So I know in some markets, we found that there's been a drop in driver numbers, which means you can't sometimes meet the full demand. And so we in those markets look quite strongly to recruit, additional drivers who meet all our criteria and our standards in order to meet that demand of supply. But I think the other element, and I think it's important to discuss in this discussion is in some cases there are areas in which drivers don't feel safe, right? And I think we do need to consider that. I think across cities, whether it's in the global north or the global south, I think there are instances where a driver at a particular time of night or day might not feel comfortable going to a particular area. And so as part of our sort of quality scoring of drivers, in certain instances, depending on the time of day, we do give them leeway to, for instance, cancel trips. We've also seen across the continent, but also in other European markets and elsewhere in the world, e-hailing operators are sometimes attacked, they're sometimes targeted. And I think when there are heightened safety issues, within the public transport space, that does again give reason for drivers not necessarily to want to risk their lives. But then over and above sort of just considering the ecosystem in which drivers have to operate, we've also, as a business, we've introduced additional safety measures, both for our passengers, but I think particularly what I'll talk about now is about drivers themselves. So in the drivers app that they have on their phone, they have the ability to press a SOS button on their phone, or separately, they can have a little remote, which they can keep in their pocket, and they can use that to activate a SOS to a service provider we've contracted. So it won't go to a call center, it won't go to the police, it will go directly to the service provider, and this service provider will deploy additional support to the driver in instances where they feel unsafe. And then there's additional things like trip insurance for them and safety insurance. And so I think in that ecosystem, one must be mindful that there are certain parts in any city, in any country, across the world where at certain times of the day it might not be safe, or in certain circumstances, right? For instance, the moment we have drivers operating in Ukraine at the moment, obviously in very difficult circumstances where we are trying to assist people to move in that country. And so you can imagine there may be instances where a driver in a country like that might not feel, today I can't say yes to this trip.
I also spoke to some drivers, so this is not just, it's still not both, it's like everywhere, and I asked them, okay, yeah, you cancel some trips, and some complain that maybe the charge which they get for the destination doesn't worth it. So I don't know, I believe for boats or any hailing services, they actually calculate the distance for the price. I don't know, I think they do that. So, but drivers like, no, the price and the destination doesn't work, so they end up not going. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so I think obviously the financial model is something that affects both platforms like Bolt, but also the drivers themselves. And so we continuously look, each year, but throughout the year, we look at the pricing fluctuations, right? So we look at your base rate, the kilometer rate, we look at, the particular demands that factor on it. Obviously, because of fuel increases across the globe of late, we actually in a current process looking at the current pricing model for drivers, and we do look at ways of incentivizing and growing the platform, right? So finding ways to partner with other organizations that grows the base of passengers, so that drivers not only have more realistic base rates, but also additional passengers for them to access. And we've run a number of successful partnerships recently with 2 financial institutions that has opened up the market substantially. And I think, just to give you a sense of the scale across the African continent, I know we spoke about sort of some of the numbers at a global level, but just in Africa, we have about 35 million passengers using our service each year. And so I think, and that number, as you can imagine in the African context, because there's a need for us to move around, that number will continue to grow. So we do look at ways to make the pricing more competitive and also more, tailored in the particular market. And I think continuing to grow the market, right? Because the service isn't just needed in our big cities, whether it's Lagos or Accra, but also in the smaller towns, right? And the further regions of our countries.
Okay. Thank you for that. I know I said one more question, but there's a thing, you said something that got my attention about the prices. So I heard about, I don't know the name of the services, but yeah, a service whereby a customer can call them, but now the customer negotiates the price with the taxi. So the only difference between them and Uber or Bolt is that both fix the price, but this time around the customer and the driver fix the price. So don't you think that would be like a serious competition? for not just not
Yeah.
not just your customers, even the drivers may end up going to a place where they can negotiate their own price.
Yeah, so I think the market, as you were saying, the market needs a number of things. So I think our pricing, we like to view it as dynamic, so it varies depending on circumstance, depending on demand. But I think what we are finding, that suggestion that you have, we're actually piloting it in one of our markets at the moment, where between the driver and the customer, there can be some negotiation on the price. And we're allowing that on the platform. I mean, in other markets, in our European markets, we have metered taxis on our platform. And to a certain extent, there is some type of negotiation. So I think it is something we're looking at, and something that's actually being piloted at the moment in one of our markets to see, how do customers find that? Do they find that they enjoy it? Do they prefer it? Do they have more money in their pocket? Does the driver have more money in their pocket? And is it fair ultimately? So I think it's, the sector will continue to evolve and improve over time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go to our last activity, which is the poll again. And so I'm going to plead with our audience to just go back to the same site. Let me quickly share my screen and just answer this question. Now, this is more like a word cloud. So go to www.menti.com and use the code 57889730 and answer the question: when booking or using ride-hailing services, what are the challenges you experience? So it's a word cloud. You can write as many words as you want. So the one that's more common will pop up. So Andrew, bear with us so you can actually see this. Okay, my area, long wait time, not available. So I think this person means not available in my area. I think so. Long wait time. Okay, just for the next 1 minute, let's see what pops up again. So you have the option of writing more than one suggestions. I set it to 3 suggestions. So let's see what you have to offer. Longer routing. Yeah, I experienced that from a taxi driver, whereby the taxi driver went to take a longer route. He doesn't know that I know the route. And I actually complained. This was not boat, it was more of a state taxi. I had to call the agency, like, why would you driver take a longer route when I know the route? So this happens a lot. Driver delays, long wait, my area, location barrier. And to just take a peek and just address what you want to address, because that's a lot.
Sure. So, I mean, I think we spoke earlier about sort of, being able to meet demand in our different markets. I think as, more people want to use the service, that's something we continue to need to do. So it's about adding more drivers onto the platform that meet the criteria. So not just adding people for the sake of it, but making sure that they meet the standard. And so I think that affects issues like the long wait time, issues, not being available in a particular area, and driver delay. I think on the longer routing, I've experienced that service not on necessarily my platform, but on other transport, right?
Okay.
And I think in instances like that, if you do find when using ride-hailing services, if you find that the routing is taking much longer, I think definitely through the app, make the point, lodge that complaint. I think it's important. And then also raise it with your driver, and I think if you have issues with your driver and you get maybe some pushback, then also log that on the app, because I think, the more feedback the app and we have around driver behavior, the better. I know in the instance, I was in the US actually, and I was using a service, and we were taking a very long route to where I needed to be. And I asked the driver, why are we taking this long route? And he explained to me, that he couldn't get onto the highway because he had issues with his engine. So he couldn't go a particular speed, right? And so we were able to have a conversation as to why it took so long. But I think it definitely is try and engage, but definitely, raise those comments through the platform so that it can get addressed. And it can get addressed with drivers directly and then also collectively.
Okay, thank you. While our audience get ready to ask questions, if there's any, this is my last question, and it has to do with still on inclusion, because we know that there are diverse needs of people. We have women with kids, or women that are pregnant, or we have elderly people. And I know you say you want to many things to help create policies or satisfy the needs of the people. But is there any future plan, just more specific, that boats are considering that are not in the current system of operation? Just most, apart from the part of the language which you mentioned earlier, of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I think from an inclusionary perspective in South Africa, we just before COVID we launched a women-only service. So where you have women drivers, driving women, and I think across the continent, the World Bank and the IFC have conducted studies about what it means to support women in the economy. And I think as part of our commitment, working with the IFC, it's really about making sure that women in particular, as entrepreneurs, have access to a platform like Bolt and streamlining their access and actually creating a pool of passengers for them. And so the women-only category was launched in South Africa, but it's also actually currently being launched in Nigeria as a service that we want to offer. And so that on one element is an approach around inclusion, but also participation in the economy. And then I think another element around inclusion, which we've been discussing with a few cities as part of their visioning process, is how does e-hailing services fit into specialized transport, right? So if someone is wheelchair bound, or they have a hearing disability or an impairment, or if they have special needs, how does an e-hailing service like Bolt fit into that broader delivery of public transport services? And we are working with one of the cities around that in South Africa, around actually realizing that. The city, as you know, governments take a bit longer to get things done, but the city's planned, it's actually part of its budgeting process and planning process at the moment, and they are looking to introduce that. So from an inclusionary perspective, that is one element. And then I think broader to our services, the one thing we're currently looking at is really the need for micromobility, right? So in communities where you need to get medicine from one site to 2 kilometers away, how do we, support that ecosystem of delivery? And particularly issues like, small items of food or packaging, or in particular cases, medicine, how do you streamline that process? And so we are looking at ways to introduce alternatives to ride hailing into the African market. And I think from an inclusionary perspective, one has to look at it constantly, right? You can't look at it as one size fits all. And I think in a number of our markets, where we have these electric scooters or these electric bikes, we look to work very closely with government around, how do you get your paving right, your tactile paving? So if someone is visually impaired, how do you make sure that the paving itself of the road is able to indicate to that person walking on the road that, there's a drop in the curb, or there's a hump in the curve. And then over and above that is to look at using Bluetooth, so that one can install, say, Bluetooth at particular traffic lights, and that can communicate into someone's earpiece, so that they know, the traffic light is red or it's green. And I think those are small things that we can all contribute. But I think we have to look at it as an ecosystem. We all have roles to play in that ecosystem, and I think we need to take it seriously.
Okay, and let me just hold my question. So I will want to open to the audience. If you have any question, you can drop on the chat, or you can just use the hand signal, like take your hands up, and I will just unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. So any question? Okay, let me look at the chat. I don't think the question on the chat. The question from the chat.
A good presentation. Just wanted to ask, Andrew mentioned about new technologies coming up. For example, I will rephrase to his words. What he said is that they're trying to negotiate prices between them and customers. Isn't that kind of causing problems within the current system, especially in South Africa? Isn't that kind of inviting problems? Because we have problems within the industry, whereby we've got e-hailing, and also we have the meter and maxi taxi owners fighting. When you bring the element of negotiation between you and the customer, isn't that kind of inviting problems?
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I think, from our perspective, we wouldn't want to introduce that into all our markets because it wouldn't be appropriate, right? So the place that it is being rolled out and tested, and it's only being tested at the moment, is in the United Kingdom, so in England, and it's specifically because of that particular circumstances in that country. The appropriateness of that being used in South Africa is highly unlikely because e-hailing services has a particular need, right? Minibus taxis in South Africa play an important and vital role. Essentially, they are the anchor of public transport in South Africa. And I think that's important, right? And the national government in South Africa is working at ways to look at integrating, right? So like how minibus taxis operate, how rail operates, how bus operates, and meter taxis. And I think it all has to be complementary. And so I think, thank you very much for your question. So I could clarify, in some of our markets, that type of negotiation element wouldn't be appropriate. And in the South African context, given the dynamics, but also the needs of people, people use the service for different reasons. And I think in the South African context, as you've highlighted, we wouldn't be thinking of rolling that out as a pilot or considering to bring it into South Africa. But in some of our other markets, maybe Norway, it might be appropriate as well. That's somewhere, as an example, that, colleagues have said that might be relevant.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to add to that. So I like I said in the previous show, we have what they call policy transfer, and when you look at policy transfer, look at the people, because you mentioned in the UK the response you got. So when you cannot just pick a policy from one region to another, you must consider how would the people perceive it, what's the reception about it. So yeah, thank you for that, Andrew. And so Andrew, you mentioned the part of the women. I really want to understand that of Uber creating the women-only services. So do you mean women are the drivers and only carry women passengers?
So part of our commitment, and it was just before COVID, was around creating a women-only category, which we launched, and that's women drivers, and that service is available for women. And I think across the continent, in the work we did and the meetings we had with folks out of the World Bank and the IFC, was to really look at what that means for the African economy, right? If you do create an ecosystem that brings women into the inclusion of the economy and what it does as a replicator within the market. And we have that service available in South Africa, but that service has also recently been launched in Nigeria. Colleagues I know last week were busy in Nigeria with that. And that, that service is complementary, so it's not like that's the only option in the country, but that is one of the offerings in the country. It doesn't mean a woman driver can't drive a larger vehicle and be, say, a van. Doesn't mean a women driver can't have a premium vehicle and have premium rides. It just means that there's an additional opportunity for a women-only service to operate in addition to what we already have going on.
Okay, so if I understand it clearly, these women can also pick male or female passengers, is what you're saying?
Yeah, depending on what category. So if they, for instance, are on one of the other categories, they can have other passengers in the vehicle. They can also drive a larger van, which, for instance, could quite easily, comfortably take a wheelchair in. But then they can also only decide to use the women-only category and then only have female passengers in their vehicle.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we are almost close to the time. Why I asked that question, because in Nigeria, I believe there are some cultures whereby they don't allow gender to mix, male and female. So I think this is a good thing for them, because most women that have this kind of culture, their mobility are restricted because they're not allowed to be close to the opposite sex. So I think this is a way to help them to be more mobile and get out to the society and make contributions. So yeah, that's a good thing. Thank you so much. And somebody said, I love this business. Do you offer training? Vincent, I don't know. Okay. I think this is meant for Andrew, right? I don't know. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have an Africa footprint. So Vincent, I'm not sure where you based or what part of the world you're in. But Bolt is continuing to hire. We're in a hiring phase at the moment across the world. So there's obviously opportunities for drivers across the world to join the platform. But we also have employment opportunities within the business, and we're looking at filling about 2,000 jobs globally during the course of this year. So there are opportunities. We also look to have interns in the business, as well as, there's new opportunities for different types of delivery of transport across the continent. So there's lots of opportunities. I think it's a growing area and a growing field across the world.
Okay, good. And so just because you said the transport will have a role to play, so I want you to just next 1 minute or 2 minutes just speak to the customer, because I feel that customers also have a role to play, because most of us are not that friendly to the operators. So what's your advice to customers, then to the taxi operators, then to your fellow policymakers? Because of course everybody has their role to play, but what is that role? What's the advice?
Yeah, so I think for customers, we continue in our communication to emphasize that, the drivers on our platform play an important role. Anyone who works in the transport sector plays an important role in taking people to places of opportunity, whether it's educational facilities, government facilities, economic opportunities. That in itself is a reason that they exist, as well as taking people to, entertainment, parks, recreational activities. And I think it's important to realize the important role transport plays in the world. And so in our communication to customers on a regular basis, we obviously encourage them to be courteous and also to be considerate. And on our platform, drivers have the ability to rate customers. And we have certain terms and conditions that customers have to adhere to. And so in some instances, where customers have been quite aggressive or rude or disparaging to our drivers, we make sure that there are consequences for that, because that's a breach of our terms and conditions as a company. And I think, from an ecosystem, we look to work with government regulators and other stakeholders across Africa and in our specific markets, ultimately to improve what citizens receive, citizens and residents. So how they're able to access transport in its different forms and shapes, and that there's a need for multiple modes of transport. You need a train, you need a bus, you need a taxi, you need your borders, and you need e-hailing, and you also need a bicycle, and you also need spaces in which you can use your feet to walk in. And I think all of that is an important part of a broader transport ecosystem. And I think in our approach, it really is about focusing in on that and emphasizing it and finding ways in which we can deliver on that promise. And, in some instances, we've also partnered with organizations in our different markets to see how we can tailor the service, how we can improve, how we can give better training to our drivers, how we can communicate better, and ultimately how we can be better in country.
Thank you so much. And our time is fast spent. So Vincent Mukhindeni, I want to apologize, but there's already time and we cannot keep our guests waiting. So if you have questions, send an email, and if I'm okay with it, you can forward it to him and possibly get back to you. So time is fast spent. So I want to say thank you so much, Andrew. We know that it's been a long day, but you took time out of work to be here with us, and we've learned a lot. And we hope to put the recording out there for people to learn also and watch. Because of the time difference, I want to say to our guests from different parts of Africa and also out of Africa, thank you for joining us today. And our sign interpreter, Joshua Fosuya, thank you so much. So have a good day all, and Andrew, thank you, and bye.
Thank you, everyone. All the best.